She walked into my dining room like she already owned it, and something in my gut told me she'd been practicing that entrance for weeks. I want you to understand something before I go any further. I have hosted senators, a federal judge, to tech billionaires, and a woman who later appeared on the cover of Forbes. I know how to read a room, and more importantly, I know how to read a person the second they cross my threshold. That's what 31 years of living inside Boston's old money will do to you. It sharpens you. It sands down every soft edge until what's left is pure instinct, dressed up in Chanel and good manners. So when my son Mateo walked through the front door of our Beacon Hill townhouse, with this girl on his arm, this too polished, too practiced, too everything girl, every nerve in my body fired at once. I smiled. I always smile. But internally, baby, I was already running her plate. Her name was Sloane. Just Sloane. No last name offered, which I clocked immediately, because in this world, last names are currency. She was 26, blonde in that expensive way that takes a colorist 3 hours and costs $400 per session to look effortless. She wore a cream silk blouse tucked into wide-legged camel trousers, and her bag, a vintage Bottega, the kind you have to hunt for, sat on my entryway bench like she'd placed it there 100 times before. She kissed my cheeks, European style, and said, "Mrs. Reyes Harrington, your home is breathtaking. Not beautiful, not gorgeous, breathtaking, the exact right word." And that right there was the first thing that scared me. Nobody gets the exact right word on the first try, unless they've rehearsed. My husband Roland stood at the bar cart, fixing drinks with his back to the door. And I watched the precise moment Sloane's eyes found him. It lasted maybe half a second, that flicker, that inventory, before she rearranged her face into polite warmth. Roland turned around, extended his hand, and said, "Sloane, Mateo's told us so much about you," which was a lie, because Mateo had told us almost nothing, which was a separate thing I planned to deal with later. Roland is 61, silver at the temples, still broad-shouldered from his rowing days at Yale. He has what I call a destination face, the kind that makes people want to walk toward it. I married it. I know exactly what it does to women who aren't prepared for it. Sloane, I noticed, had prepared. My daughter-in-law Becca was already in the sitting room, nursing a glass of Prosecco, and looking the way she always looks, warm. Slightly underdone, genuinely sweet in a way the rest of us have long since evolved out of. Becca married my oldest son, Nico, 6 years ago. And I adore her specifically because she has never once tried to impress me. She just is. Sloane sat across from Becca and spent 11 minutes, I counted, doing the most sophisticated social performance I have ever witnessed. She asked Becca about her ceramics studio. She remembered the name of the gallery that had shown Becca's work last spring, a detail Mateo would have had to specifically provide. She laughed at exactly the right moments, touched Becca's arm exactly twice, and by the time Paloma called us to the dining room, Becca was half in love with her. I could see it in Becca's eyes, that lit-up look women get when they think they've found a rare one. And here's what nobody tells you about manipulation. The best practitioners don't start with the target. They start with the people around the target, because by the time they get to you, your own people have already vouched for them. Dinner was my usual production. Paloma has been cooking for us for 19 years. And she made the lamb with the pomegranate reduction, the roasted broccoli, the cauliflower gratin that Roland says is the only reason he hasn't left me. His joke. Always his joke. Haha. Very funny, Roland. The table was set with the good china, the Waterford crystal, the linen napkins I have pressed at a service in Cambridge because I refuse to iron. Candlelight. A centerpiece of white ranunculus and eucalyptus that my florist dropped off at noon. I do these things not to show off, but because beauty is a discipline, and I believe in discipline the way some women believe in God. Sloane looked at the table and said nothing for a beat, just took it in, and then she turned to me and said, "You did all this for a Tuesday," and she smiled. And it was the most disarming thing she could have said, because it wasn't flattery. It was recognition. Like she understood what it cost, not in money, but in intention. I felt myself soften approximately 2%, which, looking back, was exactly what she wanted. But then Mateo sat down next to me, and under the damask tablecloth, he pressed my hand 3 times. 1, 2, 3. I went absolutely still. I kept my face perfect, raised my wine glass, said something to Roland about the burgundy, but my heart was going like a snare drum under my silk blouse. Because those 3 squeezes were something Mateo and I invented when he was 9 years old. He had bad anxiety as a kid, the kind that locked him up in social situations. And we developed this code so he could signal me without anyone seeing. 3 squeezes meant I need you. Something's wrong. Help me. He had not used it since he was 14. He was 32 years old, and he was using it at his own dinner, with his own girlfriend sitting 2 feet away. I looked at him. His face was completely composed. He was laughing at something Nico said, passing the bread basket, being the perfect version of himself. But he didn't look at me. And that was the second thing that scared me. Not the signal, but the fact that he wouldn't meet my eyes after he sent it, which meant whatever was wrong, it was sitting right there at my table. I watched Sloane for the next 45 minutes, with a precision I usually reserve for opposing counsel. Because before I became a society wife, I was a litigator. 12 years at a firm downtown, complex civil litigation. Before Roland and I decided together that our family needed me home, more than the firm needed me billing hours. I gave it up, and I made peace with that decision, but I never gave up the skills. You don't unlearn how to read people. You don't unlearn how to find the thread that, when pulled, unravels everything. Here's what I found. Sloane ate almost nothing. She moved the food around with surgical precision to create the illusion of consumption without actual consumption. She refilled her wine glass twice, but drank less than half of each pour. She asked Roland 3 questions over the course of the meal. Each one more personal than the last. His family's history in Boston, his father's firm, the provenance of a painting in the hallway that most guests never notice, and Roland, who is not stupid but is enormously susceptible to being genuinely interested in, leaned forward each time, like a man discovering a new continent. I watched my husband of 33 years get slowly, methodically worked, and I smiled and cut my lamb and let it happen, because the worst thing I could do right now was show my hand. But here's what really got me. She knew about the painting. That painting, a small oils and board of Boston Harbor, 1887. Unsigned, but attributed to an obscure American luminist, has hung in our hallway for 22 years. It is not flashy. It does not announce itself. You have to know what you're looking for to notice it. And you have to know considerably more to ask about it intelligently, which Sloane did. She said, "Is that possibly a bricker? The light handling on the water?" And Roland practically levitated. "It is a bricker, almost certainly, though we've never had it formally authenticated because Roland enjoys the ambiguity." The point is, how did she know? Mateo has no interest in art. He is a sports medicine physician with beautiful hands and a subscription to 3 sports analytics newsletters. He would not have told her, which meant she had done her homework on this house, this family, this specific painting, before she ever set foot through my door. The question wasn't whether Sloane was performing. The question was, performing for whom? After dinner, Roland poured the Calvados, and the men drifted toward the study. The way men in this house always do. It's a gravitational thing. That room, with its leather and its bookshelves, and its inherent permission to be loud. Becca excused herself to call the babysitter, which left me alone with Sloane for the first time, in the sitting room. With the fire going, and the city quiet outside the tall windows. She sat across from me, with her legs crossed, perfectly at ease, and I thought, here we go. This is the audition. Whatever she's after, she's about to show me the pitch. But she didn't pitch me anything. She just said, "You're trying to figure me out." I looked at her over my crystal glass. "Should I need to?" She smiled, genuinely. I think, for the first time all night, I would be in your position. I'd have been running me through every filter since I walked in. She tilted her head. Former attorney, right? I looked you up. Most people do. These days, not to be threatening, she said, and something in her voice dropped, got quieter, got more real. I looked you up because I needed to know if you were someone I could trust. And Lord help me. Something in the way she said it made every hair on my arms stand up. Because it wasn't said like a line. It was said like a confession. And there's a difference. I spent 12 years learning that difference in depositions. Between someone performing vulnerability and someone bleeding it. For just a moment, maybe 3 seconds, the curtain flickered. And what I saw behind it wasn't a predator. It was something that looked almost like fear. Then she blinked, reset, and the polish came back like a shade snapping shut. She asked me how long we'd lived in the house. We talked about the neighborhood, the new restaurant on Charles Street. A charity gala she mentioned having attended the previous spring. One I also attended, I noted, which she clearly already knew. We were circling each other with words, and both of us knew it, and somehow that made the whole thing feel oddly intimate. But then she said something that I've been turning over in my head ever since. She said, Mateo is lucky to have a mother who pays attention. Not, you're such a wonderful mother. Not, he talks about you so much. She said, a mother who pays attention. Present tense, specific. As if she was telling me I would need to. As if she was warning me. The men came back. Becca reappeared. The night wound down the way these nights do. The jackets retrieved, the cheek kisses, the compliments on the meal repeated at the door. Mateo hugged me last. And in that hug he held on a beat too long. And I felt him exhale against my shoulder, like a man setting something down he's been carrying for miles. I'll call you, he said into my ear. You better, I said back. And Sloane, standing at the bottom of my front steps in the November cold, her coat belted, her bag over her wrist, turned back to look at me one more time. Just looked, didn't wave, didn't smile, just held my gaze for a long moment, the streetlight catching the gold in her hair. And then she turned and walked with Mateo to the car. I stood in my doorway and watched them go, and I thought, that girl is either in serious trouble, or she is the trouble. And I needed to know which one before it was too late. Roland came up behind me, and put his hands on my shoulders and said, she's remarkable, isn't she? I said. I think she might be the one for Mateo. We'll see, I said. What I didn't say was, my son sent me an emergency signal at his own dinner table. And his girlfriend knew about a painting that nobody knows about. And she looked at me like I was the last lifeboat on a sinking ship. What I didn't say was that I'd excused myself twice during dinner. Once ostensibly for the restroom, and on the second trip I had quietly pulled Paloma aside and asked her one question. Did anyone come through this house today before the guests arrived? Paloma had looked at me very carefully, the way she does when she's deciding whether to tell me something. And then she said, Miss Sloane came early. Ma'am. Mr. Mateo said she wanted to help with the flowers. She had been alone in my house for 40 minutes before the dinner. I went upstairs that night while Roland read in the study, and I sat at my vanity, and I opened the notes app on my phone, and I started writing down everything. Every word, every glance, every micro-expression, every detail that didn't line up. I've been a woman in powerful rooms my entire adult life, and the one thing I've learned is that when your gut says something's wrong, you do not wait for proof. You start building the case. I had a lot of questions and zero answers. Why did Mateo use the signal? Why had Sloane been alone in my house? What was she actually looking for in that hallway? The painting? Or something near the painting? Who was she, really, before the Bottega bag and the perfect words? And why? This is the one that kept me up. Why had she said she needed to know if I was someone she could trust? Because trust, in my experience, is only something you need when you're planning to tell someone something dangerous. I pulled up Mateo's number at midnight. I didn't call. I knew he couldn't talk freely if Sloane was there. But I texted 3 words: I got it. It took 4 minutes for the response to come back. 1 word: thank you. And then, 30 seconds later, a second message that made my blood run absolutely cold. It said, "Don't trust Dad." I set my phone face down on the vanity. I looked at myself in the mirror, 58 years old, dark hair still mostly my own, reading glasses pushed up on my head. 33 years of a life I thought I understood reflected back at me. And I thought about Roland in the study downstairs, right now, probably pouring a second Calvados. Roland, who had lit up when Sloane asked about his family. Roland, who had called her remarkable. Roland, who had known, somehow, precisely where to look in that hallway at exactly the moment she asked about the painting. He hadn't been surprised she knew about it. I had been so focused on Sloane that I had missed the thing that was sitting directly in front of me the entire evening. The painting. The 40 minutes. The right words. The rehearsed entrance. None of it was about Mateo. None of it had ever been about me. It was about Roland. And whatever Sloane was to my husband, whatever she knew, whatever they had, whatever arrangement had been made in whatever room I hadn't been in, my son had found out first. And he'd brought her to my table, under my chandelier, to my Paloma's lamb and my good Waterford crystal, not to introduce his girlfriend to his mother. He'd brought her here so I could see her face. There is a particular kind of silence that lives inside a house where the truth has just changed shape. And by Wednesday morning, that silence was everywhere in my home. I did not confront Roland. I want to be very clear about that, because every instinct I have, the wife instinct, the wounded instinct, the 30-3- years and I gave up my career for this instinct was screaming at me to walk downstairs at 6 a.m. and put it all on the table. But I am not that woman. I am the woman who litigated a $200 million fraud case for 11 months and won. And I am telling you, you do not move until you know exactly what you have. You build your case in silence. You let the other side keep talking. And then, when you're ready, you don't argue, you present evidence. So I made Roland his coffee. I kissed his cheek. I said that I thought dinner had gone beautifully. And wasn't it nice that Mateo seemed so happy? And Roland said, yes, remarkable girl, that Sloane. He said remarkable again, and I watched his face very carefully while he said it, and I found what I was looking for. A small, private smile that arrived a half-second too late. Not the smile of a man thinking about his son's girlfriend. The smile of a man remembering something. The affair had been going on for a while. Long enough for the guilt to have metabolized into something comfortable. I called Mateo from my car, parked 2 blocks from the house, engine running, heat on. He answered on the first ring. Mom. His voice was tight, the voice he had as a teenager when something was bad but he was trying to hold it together. Tell me everything, I said. Right now. From the beginning. Here is what my son told me. 6 weeks ago, he had run into Sloane at a fundraiser for Boston Children's Hospital. Not a date, she had been there with someone else. Or so it had appeared. They'd gotten to talking. She was smart, sharp, funny. And she'd said something about working in wealth management that had made him give her his card. Because he was in the middle of restructuring his practice's financial accounts and needed a new advisor. They'd had coffee. They'd had dinner. And somewhere in the second dinner, when the wine was open and the conversation had gone sideways into personal territory, she had told him something that had rearranged his entire understanding of his family. She told him she had been in a relationship with his father for 2 years. 2 years. She told him it was over, that she had ended it 3 months ago, that Roland had not taken the ending well, and that she had recently discovered something in the process of extracting herself from the relationship that went beyond the affair itself. Something that implicated Roland in a financial arrangement she had not consented to and had not known about until she found documents in his secondary email account, the one she had access to because Roland, apparently, had trusted her with it. The documents detailed a series of fund transfers from a joint investment account, mine and Roland's, into a private account in Sloane's name that she had never opened and never accessed. Roland had been depositing money into an account under her identity without her knowledge. The account held just over $1.2 million. He was building her a golden parachute, I said, without asking her if she wanted to fly. Mom, it's worse than that, Mateo said. She thinks he was setting up the account so that if anything ever came out, if you ever found out, the money trail would point to her. She'd look like she'd extorted him. She'd be the villain. There it was. The thing I hadn't been able to name the night before. Sloane wasn't a predator. She was a patsy who'd figured out she was being set up. She had come to Mateo because she didn't know who else to go to. She'd gone to him, my son, her soon-to-be accidental ally, because he was the one Harrington who wasn't Roland. And Mateo, to his profound credit, had spent 2 weeks verifying everything she told him before he believed her. He's a careful person, my Mateo. He gets that from me. Why didn't you just tell me? I asked. Because I needed you to see her, he said. I needed you to use your thing, my thing. Mom, you can tell in 30 seconds if someone's lying. You always could. I needed you to meet her and make that call yourself. Because I love you and I wasn't going to blow up your marriage based on what some woman I barely knew was telling me. I sat in my car in the November cold and I loved my son with a ferocity that felt almost violent. She passed, I said. I know, he said. I saw your face. And now I had to decide what to do with a husband who had committed fraud in a woman's name and was apparently counting on her, being too compromised to come forward, and a woman who had every reason to burn it all down but had come to me instead. I asked Mateo for Sloane's number. He gave it to me. Then I sat in my car for another 10 minutes, in the cold, watching 2 pigeons fight over a piece of pretzel on the sidewalk, thinking about 33 years. Our apartment in the South End when we were young and brokish and eating takeout on moving boxes. Nico being born. Mateo being born. The house on Beacon Hill. The dinners. The galas, the paintings on the walls, the Waterford crystal. All the beautiful, disciplined life I had built, that we had built, I thought we had built, while Roland, apparently, was building something else on the side with company funds and somebody else's identity. I did not cry. I want you to know that I did not cry in the car. I cried exactly once, later, in the shower, for about 4 minutes, and then I shut it off and got to work. Because here is the thing about women like me. We are not fragile. We are just very, very patient. I texted Sloane. I said, "This is Camila, Mateo's mother. Can you meet me today?" She responded in under 2 minutes. Yes. Name the place. We met at a small hotel bar in Back Bay, neutral territory. Not somewhere Roland would ever go. Not somewhere either of us had a history. She was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with a sparkling water and a leather portfolio in front of her that told me she'd come with documents. Smart girl. I sat down across from her, and for a moment we just looked at each other, the way we'd looked at each other across my sitting room 2 nights ago. Except now, there was no performance between us, and it felt almost like relief. "I'm sorry," she said first. "Don't," I said. "You didn't choose this either. Tell me what you have." She told me everything. She had left the relationship 3 months ago after discovering the account. Before leaving, she had forwarded every relevant document to a personal email that Roland didn't have access to. Bank statements, wire transfer confirmations, emails between Roland and his private banker, a man named Prescott. Old Yale connection, discussing the account structure and the identity it was held under. Most damning of all, an email from Roland to Prescott, dated 14 months ago, that said, in his own words, in his own account, with his own email signature, "If this ever comes to light, she takes the fall. Make sure the documents support that." My husband had, in writing, planned to destroy a woman's reputation to protect himself. I looked at the printed email Sloane slid across the table. I read it twice. I set it down. I picked up my water glass and took a very measured sip, because I needed a moment to make sure that what I said next was the right next step, and not just the satisfying one. "What do you want?" I asked her. She looked at me levelly. "I want my name off that account. I want the money returned to wherever it came from. I don't want it. And I want it documented, legally, that I had no knowledge of or access to the account at any time." She paused. "I also want to be left alone. I want to go back to my life without this following me." And Roland. A long silence. She looked out the window at Boylston Street, the afternoon traffic, the gray November sky. "That's your call," she said. "You know him better than I do." Turns out, I did know him better. That was the part that was going to make this so precise. I spent the next 6 days building the case. I did not use a detective agency, because discretion mattered and because I didn't need one. I still had 2 good friends from the firm. And one of them, Petra Andrade, had gone on to become one of the best divorce and asset attorneys in Massachusetts. I called Petra from a coffee shop on Newberry Street, told her enough to get her interested, and she cleared her afternoon. We spent 3 hours together, just the 2 of us, and a pot of Earl Grey, mapping out the landscape. What Roland had done wasn't just an affair. The account in Sloane's name constituted wire fraud and identity theft, federal territory if pursued that way. The transfers from our joint accounts were marital asset dissipation under Massachusetts law, which, in a divorce proceeding, would entitle me to compensation. And the email to Prescott, the one about making sure she takes the fall, was, Petra said, exhaling slowly, the most aggressively incriminating thing I have read in 11 years of divorce work. "Can I protect Sloane?" I asked. Petra looked at me like I was interesting. "You want to protect the woman who had an affair with your husband. She was used as a weapon," I said. "I don't punish the weapon. I deal with the hand that held it." Petra smiled for the first time all afternoon. "God, I missed working with you. Here's what we did. And I'm going to tell you this slowly because I want you to understand that not one single piece of it was impulsive, not one move was made out of anger, and the whole structure was designed to give Roland exactly one option, the option that served me, and Sloane and cost him the most. First, Petra filed a formal legal notice of potential divorce proceedings, which, in Massachusetts, triggers automatic financial restraining orders. No party can move, hide, or dissipate marital assets while proceedings are pending. This locked every account Roland might try to drain or reorganize, including Prescott's arrangements. He couldn't touch anything. Second, we contacted Prescott directly, through counsel, with a copy of the email Roland had sent him. Prescott, who is 64 years old and does not want to spend his retirement being deposed in a federal fraud investigation, immediately retained his own attorney and began cooperating, fully, with everything. Third, and this is the part I'm most proud of, I arranged for Sloane to have an independent attorney present the documentation about the fraudulent account to Roland directly. In a formal setting, with witnesses, before Roland had any idea I knew any of it. The meeting was framed as Sloane coming forward of her own accord about a financial discrepancy she'd discovered. Roland sat across from Sloane and her attorney in a conference room downtown and discovered, in real time, that the trap he had built for her had been disarmed. That the documents he thought proved her guilt instead proved his. That the woman he had planned to sacrifice was sitting across from him looking perfectly composed and utterly untouchable. I was told by Sloane's attorney that Roland's face, when he realized what was happening, was something worth seeing. I wasn't in the room. I didn't need to be. I was having lunch with Becca at a restaurant on the waterfront, eating branzino and talking about her next gallery show. Because I had learned from 3 decades of litigation that the best thing you can do after you've set something in motion is go live your life calmly while it runs. My phone buzzed once. Petra, Roland's attorney, just called. He wants to talk settlement. I put my phone back in my bag. I ordered the olive oil cake for dessert. The settlement took 3 weeks to negotiate. I will not give you every number, because some things belong to me and my lawyer and the sealed portion of a Massachusetts probate record. But I will tell you, I kept the house. I kept the bricker painting. I kept the investment accounts, with interest. The money Roland had moved into Sloane's name was formally documented as marital asset, dissipation, and accounted for in the settlement terms. Sloane's name was cleared in a legal addendum, notarized and filed. Prescott retired early. Roland moved into a corporate apartment in the seaport that smells, I am told, like new carpet and regret. Justice doesn't always look like fire. Sometimes it looks like paperwork. 3 months after the dinner, after the lamb and the pomegranate, reduction and the Waterford crystal, and the 3 squeezes under the tablecloth, I had Mateo and Becca and Nico over for Sunday lunch. Paloma made her chicken with the lemon and herbs, and we ate in the kitchen instead of the dining room, because the dining room is being repainted, a lighter color, something that feels like mine. Mateo sat next to me, and at one point, passing the bread, he squeezed my hand. Once, just once, which is not the signal. The signal is 3. Once just means I love you. I know because we've always had that one too, and I squeezed back, and we didn't look at each other because we didn't need to. About Sloane, this is the part that surprised me most. She texted me, 2 months after everything settled. She said, I know you didn't have to protect me. Thank you. I sat with that text for a long time before I wrote back. I thought about who I was at 20, what I knew, what I didn't know, how easily a woman can be turned into a tool by a man who's very good at making her feel chosen. I thought about how Sloane had been smart enough to recognize the trap and brave enough to walk into my house and look me in the eye and tell me the truth. I wrote back, you protected yourself. I just held the door open. She sent a single emoji back, a small white flame. I don't know what it meant exactly, but I thought it was right. Here is the moral. Since I believe in those, a man who will frame a woman to save himself has already told you everything you need to know about how little he values the women in his life. And a woman who figures that out deserves not just safety, but every sharp, beautiful weapon she can get her hands on. I was a weapon. Sloane was a weapon. Mateo was a weapon. We just aimed ourselves in the right direction. Roland called me once, a month after he moved out. He said, Camila, I want you to know that I never stopped. I said, Roland, I'm going to stop you there. A pause. Then, right? Good night, I said. I hung up and poured myself 2 fingers of Calvados, the good stuff. I kept that too, and stood at the window of my sitting room on Beacon Hill, and looked out at the city that has belonged to me for 31 years. The lights on the Charles, the gold dome of the State House. The November sky, gone clear and cold and full of stars. My house, my china, my painting, my life. And for the first time in I don't know how long, the silence felt like mine. If this story moved you, even just a little, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever had to defend your truth when no one else believed you? Drop a comment below. I read everyone. And if you felt something while listening, if this reminded you of your own journey, or gave you a new way to see family, please give the video a thumbs up. It helps more than you know. Share it with someone who needs to hear that blood isn't the only thing that makes a family. And if you're new here or just passing through, hit that subscribe button. I've got more stories coming, real ones, raw ones about love, identity, motherhood, healing, and the messy, beautiful ways life surprises us. Thanks for watching, and remember, truth is never something to be ashamed of. Before you click away, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm grateful you spent these moments with me.